inaugurated a series of talks on legal problems. At that time, Mr. Hilly told you that if you had any questions concerning legal topics, if you would send them to him in care of this station, he would be glad to devote 5 minutes of his talk at the conclusion of his period to answering those questions. And Mr. Hilly, I believe, will tell you again tonight the same rule holds true. These are legal problems which come under the advice of the Corporation Council of the City of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Arthur J.W. Hilly.
Ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience, at the beginning of my talk in inaugurating this series of lectures last week, I announced the fact that I would be pleased to answer any questions that might be submitted for answer in connection with any legal problems that might suggest themselves to the listeners then. In accordance with that suggestion, I have received several requests. I shall answer some of them tonight. Listen in every evening at this time for the answer to your question that you may propose in connection with this series. First, no names will be mentioned in connection with any of these matters, so that you can feel the utmost confidence in writing in regard to them. Of course, I might say that no legal advice will be given in regard to any current problems that may be pending before the law department, or will any attempt be made to advise anybody who at the present time has any litigation in which a lawyer is employed. First question that has been sent to me is as follows. I own a lot on Libby Place in the borough of the Bronx and find that the city has acquired 10 feet frontage of my property for widening the street without my knowledge. Am I not entitled to some notice when the city takes my property? That is a question that has been many times presented for the consideration of the law department. The law does not require that an owner of property, part or all of which has been acquired by the city for street or park purposes, shall be given personal notice of the city's intention to take the property by eminent domain. The city, however, does publish a notice in the city record for 10 consecutive days and in 2 newspapers in the borough of Brooklyn, where Brooklyn property is affected, of a public hearing to be held by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment on a day stated in the advertisement to consider the advisability of the city acquiring the property. At this public hearing, any owner affected by the proceeding, either by having his property taken or by reason of the fact that the taking of the property will call upon him to pay an assessment for the acquisition, may appear and offer objection to the improvement. If the Board of Estimate and Apportionment determines that the best interest of the city will be conserved by the improvement, it adopts a resolution authorizing the acquisition of the property, and thereafter another notice is published in the city record for 10 consecutive days, stating that the Corporation Council will apply on a certain date to the Supreme Court to have the court determine the compensation to be paid to the owners for their property. After the court authorizes the proceeding, another notice is published for 10 days advising the owners affected to file claims for their damage with the Corporation Council and the county clerk. None of the foregoing, of course, gave this owner any personal notice, and unless he read the notices in the city record or heard about it in his neighborhood, he would be unaware that part of his property was acquired by the city for street purposes. How can I collect my money? As this owner did not file a claim or appear before the Corporation Council to prove his title to the property, the city did not know to whom to pay the award, and therefore the court ordered the award made to an unknown owner. The owner may obtain a set of forms from the Corporation Counsel for the purpose of making a motion to the court to have the award made to him as owner. It will be necessary, however, to appear before the Corporation Counsel to give testimony in support of proof of his title, and if the award is over $500, as in this case, the court will probably refer the matter to a referee to hear testimony and report back to the court as to who owns the property. The award will then, if no defect appears in the title, be paid to the owner. Still another question. I own a delicatessen store in Brooklyn and have a lease for 2 years more. The city is taking the building by eminent domain, and the owner tells me I will have to move. Am I entitled to anything for the unexpired term of my lease? In order to answer that question, I would, without additional information as to the facts, have to see the lease. If the lease contains a so-called condemnation clause, which appears in many leases, the lessee would not be entitled to the value of the unexpired term of his lease. This condemnation clause usually provides that the lease shall terminate at the option of the landlord if the property is acquired by the federal government, the state of New York, or the city of New York for public purposes. If a tenant signs such a lease, he agrees that he will vacate the store if the landlord so desires, in the event the property is taken by eminent domain, and he is therefore not entitled to the value of the unexpired term of his lease. If the lease does not contain such a clause, and the rental value of the store is more than the rent paid by the lessee under the terms of his lease, he would be entitled to the difference between the rental value and the rent provided under the lease for the period of the unexpired term. Those are some of the questions that have been submitted. There are others that will be answered at a subsequent time on this broadcast. I think at the close of the last broadcast, I gave some detailed statistics in regard to the litigation that was carried on between the city of New York and the state of New Jersey in connection with the water supply of the city of New York. I believe that that case is one of the most interesting litigations that has been conducted by the law department in its history. And it might be well to give some further facts that occurred in connection with that litigation. Now, of course, there isn't any publicity about the work of the law department. Recently, a newspaper commented about the fact of the work that was carried on in connection with the Delaware water case, that kind of work was poor publicity, but good public service. Nobody had any thought about the retention of water or water supply. Nobody bothered their heads about it. You don't see in the city of New York any of those advertisements about water that you sometimes see about real estate. I suppose they were popular a good many years back. Nobody worries about it. But in the city of New York, you advertise the fact that there are 3 and 4 baths, apartments with every kind of facility, and nobody ever stops to think that it takes water to make these supplies available. I have traveled, been around to the various cities, and I dare, if I were to ask of you, naming the places I was going to, you're to say, order a bottle of Poland water because you won't be able to drink the water there. Have you ever been to this town? But I want to tell everybody that if you are getting it for your office, it is a needless expenditure. The best water is to be found in the hydrants in the city of New York. The greatest supply found anywhere in the world. Do you realize that in the course of one day during the heat of the summer, that all of the golf clubs are active in and around New York City, and everybody plays a game and takes a shower bath, plays another game and takes another shower bath, and runs home to take another one? You know that 4 or 5 a day to keep cool and plenty of water all the time. Then look at all the lawns and gardens with the hose sprinkling the water all over the gardens and flowers. I don't know how interesting this water problem is to you, but do you realize that in the course of one day, we are consuming about 1,200,000,000 gallons, and we have a supply of water, the maximum capacity of which is capable of giving us 1,100,000,000 gallons a day. Of course, we don't use 1,200,000,000 gallons every day, but the average consumption is something in the neighborhood of 892 million gallons a day. Lately, something has been said of this shortage. It is a good and timely warning issued by the Commissioner of Water Supply, Gas, and Electricity, but at the same time, in these figures, there is great commendation to the wisdom and judgment of J. Waldo Smith, the engineer who built the first Catskill Waterworks, and Thaddeus Merriman, chief engineer of the Board of Water Supply now. When you stop to consider that 1930 was the driest year on record in 63 years, and that it was 30% drier than any other dry year of which we have a record, and yet we come to the end of 1930, and the report goes forth that we are still able to give you a supply for 130 days more, the wisdom and judgment of the engineers who built the wonderful work in the Catskills are deserving of the highest praise of the citizens of New York. We have now come to the dividing line. We have taken all the water flowing our way. Now we are some 130 miles from Pennsylvania and perhaps 40-odd miles from the Delaware at the boundary point between New York and New Jersey. And we want some more water of the same character we now have. Water that we can take and bathe in, and then we treat it. New Jersey came along and said, you cannot touch the water for this and that reason. One of their arguments was that they had oysters in the Delaware River that needed 16 gallons of water per day. I never knew that the oyster was such a toper before, but honestly, an oyster during the ordinary course of the day takes 16 gallons of water. In addition to that, the further claim was made that somehow and somewhere, a great power development was going to take place on the Delaware River, and we must not take any water for the city of New York. And then again, it would destroy the recreational facilities of the Delaware River by ruining the Delaware water gap. And all of the boarding houses were located on the Pennsylvania side. But we would destroy New Jersey's recreational facilities. And then again, we would destroy the agricultural lands located in the state of New Jersey. Till I got into this case, I had some respect for stockbrokers. I still have a great deal of respect for real estate brokers. But they began to put a value on that land, and I asked, well, who did you sell it to? 3,500 acres was all they could find to dispute about. They said they got $19,000 to $20,000 an acre. I said, how? They said, we sold it to some New York stockbrokers. I said to them, I hope you did not sell it on margin. Now, what was the cost? I understand that the cost, from rumor in the public press, the sovereign state of New Jersey spent a sum in excess of $300,000 to present for the consideration of the Supreme Court this Delaware water case. I tried that case myself, and for handling that case and the telephone case and the electric case and running the law department of the city of New York, I got $25,000. I'm trying to think whether it was $25,000 for the whole year or not. Included the traveling expenses of counsel, room and meals, the cost of stenographer's minutes, the printing of the record, and all other incidentals that would enter into an enterprise of that kind cost just $60,000. The result of the litigation was that after the matter had been carefully considered by the master appointed by the Supreme Court of the United States, it was decreed that we should be entitled to take 450 million gallons a day more for the supply of water to the city of New York. Incidentally, in passing, it may be remarked that this supply is equal to the present supply that we are now receiving, and the supply we are now receiving is the best supply of water that could be gathered together for any municipality in the world. Had we not been successful in that litigation, we would have been called to seek out other sources. And those other sources, for a supply of water that would have been inferior to the supply that we are now receiving, would have cost the taxpayers of the city of New York an additional expenditure of $73 million. So we not only were able to obtain for the city of New York the best supply of water that could possibly be obtained, but at the same time we were able to save $73 million to the taxpayers of the city of New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hilly. The Honorable Arthur J.W. Hilly, Corporation Counsel of the City of New York, giving the second of a series of talks which he calls Legal Problems Explained over WNYC in New York. May I repeat Mr. Hilly's invitation to you? If you have any questions you would like to ask him concerning the law, write to him in care of this station, WNYC, the Municipal Building, Chambers Street in New York. Mr. Hilly's talks on legal problems are every Thursday evening at 8 o'clock. Signature you are now listening to is composed of the beautiful strains of an old Grecian shepherd song played by Don Avalon and his orchestra. During the program, Mr. Avalon will play ancient and modern Greek music. Specially arranged by Mr. Avalon for performance over the station. Following this beautiful old shepherd song, Don Avalon and his orchestra will play a Greek march of Sakalarides. Played by Don Avalon and his Greek orchestra at WNYC in New York. Mr. Avalon will be glad to hear your opinion of this program. If you will write to him in care of this station, WNYC, the Municipal Building, Chambers Street in New York. Mr. Avalon's programs include the music of ancient Greece and the music of modern Greece, mostly arrangements by himself. Their theme song, beautiful strains of an old Grecian shepherd song. This is Roland Weber announcing. Bert Dixon continues the program in presenting the next speaker.
At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we take pleasure in presenting Mr. Ralph H. Keeland, attorney in charge of the New York branch office of the Federal Trade Commission, who speaks to us this evening under the auspices of the Federal Business Association on the subject of federal control of unfair competition. Mr. Keeland.
Ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience, through the courtesy of Commissioner Goldman of the Department of Plants and Structures and Director Bonsack of Station WNYC, a representative of one of the numerous branches of our federal government operating in the metropolitan area is privileged to address you at this hour on every Thursday evening during the coming months, that you may be better informed of the activities of your government. In introducing this series of addresses, the Honorable Albert Furman, Postmaster of Brooklyn and President of the Federal Business Association of New York City, told you that each of these representatives would be called upon to give an account of the service that his office is rendering to the public. I am appreciative of this opportunity of telling you something of what the Federal Trade Commission is and of its efforts to control unfair competition. For you, as members of the vast multitude whom we refer to as the public, have a vital interest in the activities of the Commission and the exercise of its corrective powers, inasmuch as the conditions under which they are applied may determine, in the last analysis, your success in business or your protection as a citizen. The Commission is an independent establishment of the government, control of which is vested in 5 commissioners appointed by the President. Under the Act of Congress that gave it life on September 26, 1914, it is empowered to prevent unfair methods of competition in commerce when it has reason to believe that a proceeding in respect thereof would be in the public interest. The Commission institutes such a proceeding by complaint, and after hearing and on proper showing, issues an order to prevent the party from using such method of competition. The Act does not define, and the courts have held that it is for them, and not the Commission, to ultimately determine as matter of law what constitutes unfair methods of competition. It has been said that they include only those acts that are characterized by bad faith, fraud, or oppression, or that tend to unduly hinder competition or create monopoly. The Organic Act also authorizes the Commission to investigate on its own initiative the organization, business conduct, and management of corporations engaged in interstate commerce, or, upon the direction of the President or either House of Congress, any corporation that may be violating the antitrust laws. The preponderance of cases coming before the Commission relates to violations of the Federal Trade Commission Act. The courts have always held that the purchasing public should be protected from deception if that deception results in their securing articles or products they did not intend to purchase. Conditions of competitors that may bring about uniformity of prices, or unduly enhance prices, or divide territory, or drive competitors out of business by oppressive means, such as selling below cost, or to prevent one competitor from securing the trade secrets of another by espionage, or the enticement of his employees in such numbers as would hamper his business, or from obtaining the trade which rightfully belongs to his competitor by bribery. In the past year, the Commission has issued approximately 115 orders to cease and desist and accepted approximately 235 stipulations wherein respondents have agreed to discontinue practices which the investigation of the Commission has disclosed to be unfair. These cases involve almost every article that is the subject of barter and sale in interstate commerce. On the whole, the Commission's efforts to correct misrepresentations in its many forms have been effective. This phase of the work develops many interesting problems which very intimately affect every household in the United States. For example, a question now under consideration by the Commission pertains to the use of the term part wool in describing blankets or clothing, without much regard to the actual wool content. The fairness of the term has been questioned, it being contended that it should only be used when the amount of wool is sufficient to give the product, if composed mostly of cotton, some added warmth. Certain of the Commission's powers are more clearly defined in the Clayton Act, also passed in 1914. The time allotted me permits only the most casual discussion of this act. A complete review of the subject would involve the summarizing of many orders of the Commission and a wide range of court decisions. In brief, Section 2 of the Act provides that it shall be unlawful to discriminate in price between different purchasers of commodities, for the effect of such discrimination may be to substantially lessen competition or tend to create a monopoly in any line of commerce. In the cases of the Mann & Company against the Federal Trade Commission and National Biscuit Company against the Federal Trade Commission, the Circuit Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit held that discriminations in prices made by manufacturers, which were based upon the different trade status of purchasers of their goods, was not unlawful. While in a recent case involving the American Can Company, the Supreme Court held in an opinion delivered by Justice Sutherland that a fundamental policy of the legislation is that in respect to persons engaged in the same line of interstate commerce, competition is desirable, and that whatever substantially lessens it or tends to create a monopoly in such line of commerce is an evil. Offense against this policy by discrimination in prices exacted by the seller of different purchasers of similar goods is no less clear when it produces the evil in respect to the line of commerce in which they are engaged than when it produces the evil in respect to the line of commerce in which the seller is engaged. Section 3 of the Act relates to those contracts by which the manufacturer requires the merchant to whom he sells his goods to refrain from handling competing lines of goods. These exclusive dealing contracts are also declared by the Act to be unlawful, and the effect may be to substantially lessen competition or tend to create a monopoly. The cases involved in this section have turned largely on the question of whether or not the manufacturer held a dominant position in the industry, and the effect of the agreement was to substantially lessen competition. A series of decisions has also interpreted Section 7 of the Act. This is directed against the combination of competing corporations through stock acquisition. The test of the illegality of the acquisition by one corporation of the stock of another was recently stated by the Supreme Court in the case of the International Shoe Company against the Federal Trade Commission in these words: mere acquisition by one corporation of the stock of a competitor. The forbidden result if there be no existing substantial competition to be effected. For the public interest is not concerned in the lessening of competition, which to begin with is itself without real substance. The function of the Commission is entirely administrative and strictly limited by the laws that I have referred to. Its primary purpose is to protect the public, not to punish the offender. It is aimed at persons, not at persons, but at unfair methods. If supported by evidence, the findings of the Commission are conclusive. The decisions are, however, subject to review by the Circuit Court of Appeals, which may either affirm, modify, or set aside the orders. And in the final analysis, it is the court that determines whether or not the facts justify the orders of the Commission. It has been stated that government never interferes in business until business creates necessity. The necessity for this interference by government may be avoided to a great extent by business taking the initiative, by the establishment of its own rules of conduct, and by cooperation with government, thus achieving the elimination of unfair competition. The government will assist and encourage these efforts of business toward the correction of its own abuses. But should the necessity arise, the government should promptly exercise its remedial powers to the fullest extent. In recognition of this principle, The Commission early adopted the practice of holding trade practice conferences, which provide, under the Commission's sanction, the means by which business may voluntarily purge itself of illegal as well as unethical practices. About 150 industries have adopted resolutions condemning, in some manner, the use of practices peculiar to their businesses. The resolutions of these numerous industries dealing with commercial bribery, fake trademarks, price discrimination, selling below cost, and all other forms of business sniping hold up to their membership higher standards than they have probably previously known or practiced. In his annual message to Congress on December 5th, 1905, President Roosevelt closed with the following statements pertaining to the nation's business. Statements that are as pertinent today as they were then. Business success, whether for the individual or for the nation, is a good thing only so far as it is accompanied by and develops a high standard of conduct, honor, integrity, civic courage. The kind of business prosperity that blunts the standard of honor, that puts an inordinate value on mere wealth, that makes a man ruthless and conscienceless in trade and weak and cowardly in citizenship, is not a good thing at all, but a very bad thing for the nation. This government stands for manhood first and for business only as an adjunct of manhood. In conclusion, I take this opportunity to send the good wishes of the staff of the New York branch office of the Federal Trade Commission, located at 45 Broadway in this city, to their many friends throughout the territory covered by this office, which includes the New England states, New York, New Jersey, and Eastern Pennsylvania. We are always at your service to promote honesty in business.
Thank you, Mr. Keelan. Ladies and gentlemen, the Federal Business Association this evening afforded us the privilege of presenting Mr. Ralph H. Keelan, attorney in charge of the New York branch office of the Federal Trade Commission, who spoke to us on the subject of federal control of unfair competition. This is WNYC, New York. This is Bert Dixon announcing. Roland Weber presents the next feature.
WNYC in New York presenting the Filipino Sextet. I believe they're all guitars. I'm not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are they all guitars? Question which is important in any group. What does a hospital mean to the community?
Ladies and gentlemen, the radio audience, some of you may not know what a hospital really stands for in the community. Several thousand people have in the past few weeks responded to the public invitation to inspect the marvels of construction and equipment in the ultra-modern Temple of Healing at 169th Street and Fulton Avenue, the new building of the Bronx Hospital. Perhaps you are one of them and will know something of the wonders there. If you are not, I urge you to come on one of the next few Sunday afternoons when competent guides will show you through and the nine spacious stories of the granite, steel, and terracotta structure that is absolutely fireproof. To do this, it is a civic duty that you will enjoy. In your tour of inspection, you will see one of the most modern institutions of its kind in existence today. Not only does this statement hold for the city of New York and its very large hospitals, but it stands also for the entire American continent from coast to coast. It is a monument to the medical profession and to the public-spirited men and women of many professions and callings whose foresight, integrity, many made this erection possible. There you will see that everything is in readiness for rendering service, the humanitarian service of saving lives and ministering to the needs of the ill and injured. Every room, every utility compartment, every laboratory, every scientific device of proved merit In fact, every needed facility of modern hospitalization stands ready to become useful for the particular purpose for which it has been conceived, contemplated, planned, and constructed. But the pall of tragedy shrouds all this. As you pass through the wide corridors into the many private and semi-private rooms, into the wards equipped with comfortable beds of the latest hospital design, wards for women, for men, for maternity cases, for children, with delightful playrooms adjoining. As you pass through the great kitchens and the modern appliances for the scientific preparation of food, through the vast laundry with capacity for cleansing 30,000 pieces of linen per day, through the many sunlight flooded cell area with windows made special glass to speed the recovery of patients by scientific filtration of the sun's ultraviolet rays. As you see all this and the many other marvels of this new hospital, you will no doubt be automatically, unconsciously overtaken by the stillness of it all. On a moment's reflection, you will no doubt have become aware of the great tragedy, as have I and thousands of others, a tragedy that is written in every supporting brick and block of granite, on every step and window, on every wall and corner of the many rooms and corridors of this great structure. The pity, the pathos, the tragedy of it is that the building recognized by experts as the last word in hospital construction was finished and almost fully equipped more than a year ago. Yet it is idle, inert, unoccupied, because there are no funds available to put it into operation. Meantime, in its present antiquated and wholly inadequate quarters, the Bronx Hospital has for more than a year and is now turning away an average of more than 150 applicants for admission monthly, because there is no room for them. Think of the tragedy of having this marvelous new building standing idle just across the avenue with rooms and equipment that will increase the hospital's capacity 4 times, enough not only to take care of present demands, but to minister to the needs of the sick poor, the injured, and other unfortunates of the community for many, many years to come. Your mind, no doubt, in serious thought, will lead you to realize that these dormant constructions and machineries, ready as they are military in service, represent investment of money and effort expended by women and men of the same caliber as you are. They have sensed and realized the need of an additional large hospital in the borough of the Bronx. But the opening of the new hospital is one job that has to be done, depression or no depression. Indeed, largely because of the depression and its resulting misery, it really is a matter of life and death that concerns all of you who are listening. Today, this hospital with its doors closed needs your help and your personality, all that you stand for and all that you can do. So we are asking you to join the others who have given and are giving so generously of their time and means in this benevolent and humanitarian service, so that through your help, this institution may become functioning relatively for the purpose for which it has been prepared, to eliminate pain and suffering, to restore to health the sick mother and return her to her babies and the father at his fireside. As a passing wayfarer, actuated by a realization, the satisfaction of true living can come only from service rendered. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in making my appeal to you for the Bronx Hospital, I am doing so not only in behalf of humanity, but for your own sake. If any of you were without food or shelter, you should probably have little difficulty in securing same from a neighbor, a friend, a charitable institution, or the municipal authorities. This, however, is not applicable to modern scientific hospital facilities. If you are taken seriously ill with some malady that required hospital attention, and if there were no hospital beds in the community to serve you, your lives and the lives of the ones near and dear to you may be at stake. Such a condition is now prevalent in the city of New York, and more particularly in the Bronx County. Modern scientific hospital facilities cannot be created overnight. They must be intelligently planned, constructed, equipped, and supervised by doctors and nurses competently trained. It takes years to accomplish this. Our hospital is all ready for this service. It is up to you and to me, ladies and gentlemen, to help turn the key to open its doors. Your liberal donations and subscriptions to our institution. Our institution is non-sectarian. We minister to the people, regardless of race, creed, or color. For any further information that you might require regarding our hospital, write or phone the Bronx Hospital Campaign Headquarters at 369 East 149th Street, Borough Bronx, City of New York. Telephone Melrose 56420. I thank you very kindly.
WNYC in New York, concluding the address by Isidore Teitelbaum, member of the Board of Directors of the Bronx Hospital, answering the question, what does a hospital mean to the community? We continue in presenting to you again the Filipino String Sextet. The 6 instruments I have found out in the meantime are a bandolia piccola, a Philippine instrument, a lute, an octavina, a guitar, a Hawaiian string guitar, a mandocello, and a bass guitar. It is also interesting to know that most of the arrangements for the program this evening have been made by Crisanto Cardinal, a member of the sextet. The second part of that program begins with The Day Begins and Ends with You.